Hello, I'm Jeremy Staglitz. You might know me as one of the creators of ARK and founders of Studio Wildcard. I'd like to take some time here with you guys today to go over some new features we recently added to the ARK dev kit that I think are pretty cool. Those are specifically the new custom cosmetic systems and the simple game framework. Let's start with the simple game framework. So to activate it, go to UGC and enable the mod Dino Defense. Kind of silly in terms of how it's named, but if you know some of my history, you might guess at what I was originally going to spend some time doing. Um, in any case, load up Dino Defense, load up Turkey Trial, and you can grab all these assets here. Well, sorry, you don't have to load up Turkey Trial. Load up whatever mod you want to move the framework into, and just move the assets over there. That'll keep everything relative, and you'll get all the functionality that you can then build on in your own mod. So you can essentially move everything. I don't recommend moving the mod data asset. You'll have your own mod data asset, um, but you can see what the changes are, and of course, very easily edit your own. It really just has a mod name. I don't know what would happen if you move that. In any case, I do recommend deleting from the framework folder the following folders because they are really just related to the platformer example we made. So if you don't want to make a 2D platformer, you're not going to need them. And yeah, it's like 700 megabytes of assets in there. So you're going to want to delete the external actors folder, the external objects folder, the generated folder, the 2D platformer folder, and the movies folder. Of course, if you want to use the movies, just replace them if you want to use like the loading movie or something. Um, what this simple game framework is, once you've taken the platformer example out of the way, is a set of classes that are basically take the functionality back pretty close to stock Unreal. You've got your own game mode, your own game state, your own player controller, your own character pawns, and they're almost entirely driven through blueprints. There's very little that you cannot find that's hard coded with these. So, for example, the characters, the simple character and the subvariants of it, they aren't even primal characters anymore. They're just Unreal characters and Unreal pawns. Same thing with the like a kind of basic player UI, and the HUD is completely stripped down, and the player controller is completely stripped down. Some of those classes, such as the game mode, game state, and player controller, are still technically inherited from our native C++ versions, but they basically disable all the ARK stuff, so everything's handled in Blueprint. The input handling, the UIs, and so on and so forth. So essentially, the idea is that anything you would want, you can find in the blueprint, and you're not dealing with ARC specific classes. This is essentially if you wanted to make your own kind of from scratch game. And obviously, the player camera, essentially very important. That one's entirely blueprint driven as well. So even the input handling, it's all in there. You can poke around, and there's very important spawn handling functions in the game mode, such as what happens when a player presses start, what happens when a player logs into the server, what do we want to do? Do we want to give them pawn? That's all handled in Blueprint. Do we want to send them a message that asks them to choose a pawn? And it does even handle the reassociation of a player ID with a character all in Blueprint. So if you wanted to have people be able to reconnect and go back into the same body, that's handled with Blueprint as well. And um, pretty much the idea is there isn't anything left in native that you can't get at. In the game data, it disables automatic world saving, that you can turn that back on. So you can just call save world if you want. There is also a way you can save your own data if you don't want to use our world saving system. That is, it also has its own player data blueprint. This is in case you wanted to use our system to create unique per player ID profiles, like associations. And in here, it adds additional blueprint values that get saved out as well. So if you want to have your own per logged in player profile that has a bunch of random arbitrary data in it, you can have your own blueprint here you can inherit from, and then just tell or just modify this one rather because it's already set into the game mode, and add whatever blueprint values you want in here. We just added something called persistent level which I think we increment with a button press just to make sure it was working. Let's see what that shows up as. Yeah, I think you want to make sure it's flagged save game since it'll actually be serialized out. And here's an example here of how we actually replicate it to the player by assigning it to a sibling value in the player state blueprint. This does show example of using nav mesh data as well with the base character, stripped down arbitrary behavior tree. It has nothing to do with ARK particularly. Just you can find out all the information you want about those systems with general Unreal tutorials, stripped down animation blueprint. Everything as basic as you can. This is intended to be what's like the simplest cruddy third person controller game with multiplayer support and damage handling and attack handling you could imagine, all done within Blueprint. That's what this is. You can strip down further if you wanted, if you're not making that kind of game, but this is about as simple as you could get this kind of game done through Blueprint. There's a few different like floating HUD interfaces all done through Blueprint, so you can see how that's done, or can be done, since you can do it any other way with Blueprint as well. Basic pause menu and options menu, all demonstrated here. Respawn handling all via the game mode BP as well. And again, most of the classes related to this are overridden in the game data and in the game mode BPs, but you can just modify these ones. You don't necessarily have to re-inherit from them since you'll just be copying this over to your own project anyway. Something important about the primal game data here is that we inherited it from the base primal game data, meaning it doesn't have the overhead of all the ARK classes being loaded. Technically, right now in the game, we still load the ARK classes anyway, but we are very shortly going to be changing that, where if we detect a mod game data that does not derive from ours, we will unload our own game data to make all of the console hardware memory available specifically for the mod, which will give you access to the full system RAM of a console and not have to worry about our classes being loaded on top of yours. So again, the simple game framework kind of presumes you want to just be making a fresh game. If you didn't, you could reparent this to inherit from the primal game data NX, and you could frankly use pieces of this simple game framework and not all of it if you wanted to have like a lot of ARK, but not all of ARK. So that's kind of up to you. This takes it all the way to basically no ARK. If you use your own game data that doesn't inherit from ours, I definitely recommend making sure all these values are set in it, much as I have here, because, or you again move this one over to your mod, because these do kind of give basic core functionality such as the correct button overrides for the different consoles, the haptics for PlayStation, and basic icons for talking. Like these really wouldn't need to change, and if you did change them, it could kind of actually break the mod a little bit. So this is kind of about the minimal data you need for this to work. I think this is just all zeroed out. Those unused gender definitions, since this mod overrides the spawning entirely via the game mode BP. I could go in and more specifically like walk you through the game mode BP, but honestly, once you open it up, it's pretty obvious. It has a bunch of functions to specifically handle login flow and reconnection flow in terms of what the game is going to be doing in that case. Previously, that was all hardened in native code. Now it's all exposed and overridden via the blueprint. So let's just take a look briefly at like what this very basic mod does. Oh, that's not the right map. So, of course, I want to load into the mods test map area, not the general test map area. So once this finishes loading me up, I will do that. Sorry, I didn't have anything cached yet, so it's going to be a moment. All right, so that's ARK, obviously. So to load, obviously, a map and a mod, just you load the plugin, then you double-click the map. We have a menu system here as well. So basic main menu and a menu map. The new framework does include the support of overriding the menu. I think that's probably via the game data, if I remember correctly, in sense of what telling it to go to a different main menu. Yeah, main menu map override, and then you would set your main menu as the actual map that's selectable from the host UI in the game, so that they go from the host UI into your total conversion mod. Eventually, we're going to actually separate total conversions to a different menu, so like the flow for players getting into them is more clear, and they don't feel like they're just going into a regular map. They know they're kind of entering a wholly separate game, if you will. Also, we're going to support very shortly searching for sessions, listing them, multiplayer sessions that is, within your mod's own UI, so players don't have to go back out to the main ARK menu to find sessions of your mod. And they kind of stay within your mod's menu system. But this is a basic main menu just to show like having non-dedicated hosting options. For dedicated, of course, they just use all INI, so this is moot for if you wanted dedicated hosting. But non-dedicated options, just showing two different levels and the basic options menu. There is something new called the transition map, and that relates to something called seamless traveling, which is an Unreal concept that I'll briefly discuss shortly. So let's load into one of the actual gameplay maps, though. I still have Turkey Trial loaded. I do. Let me get rid of that. All right. So not much going on here. Again, in a simple mod, it shows character selection since I wanted to maybe show kind of how you could override the default spawning a character. Okay, tiny or medium, we'll go tiny. Yay, we're a tiny little Bigfoot. Um, don't mind that ARK um, debug menu, and uh-oh, that guy's going to attack me. And this does use nav mesh, as you can see, he walks around the corner properly. So that's it. It's all very simple behavior tree, very simple damage and attack handling. None of it's like super fancy or anything. We try, you can jump. It's all done via blueprint though, just to show you that you're not having to deal with any ARK concepts anymore. You could still actually use like the ARK item system if you wanted to. I mean, that's all still there. So you could, if that was useful to you, but say other ARK concepts were not, you can kind of pick and choose some of that native functionality you want. I left it. When I was writing this, I left the notification HUD as part of the HUD, but of course you could turn that off or make your own. You don't have to use that ARKy notification. I just found it convenient. So a few neat things. It supports listen server properly. Somewhere in there. Oh yeah, got to have two players to actually show that. I don't know if you can see this other UI. Hopefully, if it's only recording the one window, maybe not my entire screen. But yeah, there's two players here. There's that other guy. And it supports dedicated sessions. Play as client. Let's do one. So now I'm connected to dedicated, and this is kind of cool. It supports split screen to 4 players. So you just press start on a second controller, and boom, I'm in split screen mode with my 2 HUDs. And so if you look inside the blueprint, you'll see it adds the HUDs in a very specific way that actually processes them. It's called process and add to split screen viewport. So it's actually good to kind of always call that if you want it to be a split screen UI, even if you only intend to maybe do a single player game. It's kind of just best practices because then they will automatically work in split screen. Process and add to split screen viewport. And then the HUD will scale properly to the aspect ratio of the split screen. And you can still do full screen HUDs for like a pause menu and so forth. So that's pretty cool. Let's talk a little bit about seamless travel. So that's a new concept. ARK doesn't use it, but your custom game mod might. And I don't think it actually works super well in PIE, so I'm not going to click these buttons, but you'll see what the blueprint does. It just calls a OpenMap EX, which has a seamless travel option. And seamless travel will always load the transition mod map in between the 2 maps. So you can put like a little loading message in there. So what seamless travel does, it will keep all the connections on a multiplayer session as you go from one map to another. Very useful for like co-op games or narrative type games with games with progression, not open world games. For Mickey, of course, we use it to progress the multiplayer clients from level 1 to level 2. It also keeps all player controllers along with, I think, player states. I definitely know player controllers, so maybe player states. You can actually add additional actors to transition as well via the get seamless travel actors function that's wrapped to BP, I think in the player controller. Can't remember if player states go on with it along with it or not. But certainly you can use that though to like cache information, the player controller to keep progression. If you didn't want to actually store that separately in like the player data or something, you can just cache it inside the player controller actor, and that will go along with the actual player controller connections with connected clients. So. And of course, in split screen, it will transition all the split screen players as well, so people don't like then have to like respawn their split screen player on the next level. It will not display the loading movie if you do seamless travel, at least not the whole time, which is why the transition map, you could pop open the loading movie in there as we do in Mickey, or just display a loading UI text in the transition map if you don't want to see anything other than black. It's important to note that the Mickey platformer essentially derives from the simple game example by inheriting from all its classes and then just doing what it wants with those. So Mickey is basically using this entirely. You just that's all the Mickey stuff is in the platformer 2D folder, which I deleted for this example. So if you want to make a platformer or like a 2D type game like that, you could just straight up start working up the Mickey application. But if you want to make something very different, just delete those folders like I mentioned earlier, and then work these up as you need. Everything's done in Blueprint here. And one other thing, saving. So of course you could just use the save world. You can either have it be automatic, that's the game mode thing where it will just save on exit. There's an option for that. Turn it off in the simple game example by default in the simple game mode just to not have it automatically be saving. You can call save world manually then, which will force a save of the map using the actor serialization system. But if you just want to save, say you don't want to save worlds or maps, you want to save some kind of custom data entirely, whatever you want, the best way to do that now is to call save game data. There's a new function that you call with save game data, and I think the options menu probably does that to save out some custom options. Let's see. Of course, it's literally saving the options as part of the game data, but you can make that progression data or whatever you want. So I think it just has a few custom options. Yeah. Get game data, cast it to our specific game data class that we want, and then save and then set some values on it, and then save the game data. All that saving custom data really is going to be for now is adding additional properties to our game data blueprint. Whatever you want. It could be entirely custom structs like Mickey game uses, and marking those save game. And then when you call save game data, it will save those into a directory for the user. And then it automatically loads that up when they play the mod. So you don't have to call load, it's done automatically, and then it just repopulates the save game properties of your game data blueprint with whatever you save them as. And of course, you can make a reset button if you want that just resets them to default and saves. So basically, to add custom saving, just put whatever you want as properties. It could be custom structs and so forth containing arbitrary data. You could serialize anything you want arbitrarily. Click mark the property save game and call save game data to trigger the saving, and then it loads automatically on startup. You could handle processing of that information if you'd like on the initialize game data, I think, blueprint event if you wanted to do something with the data to kind of work it up on init after it's been loaded. Right, so I think that's the basics of the simple game framework, or at least the intent of it. Obviously, exploring the different classes blueprints themselves, especially the simple character, will give you a pretty good idea of the basics, but it's nothing you haven't seen before with respect to blueprint replication and blueprint input handling and basic blueprint events and so forth. The key is that it's not hardened or locked into ARK classes at this point. Let's move on to talk about the custom cosmetics. So for that, we're going to disable, hopefully it doesn't vomit because I have the map loaded when I, good, okay. And we are going to enable, there's three real kinds of cosmetics for custom cosmetics. There's structure cosmetics, costume cosmetics, and item cosmetics that are not costume cosmetics. You may call them like armor cosmetics. Let's do costume cosmetics first. They're actually the simplest one. For that, we have the Steamboat Willie example that we made. This one's pretty straightforward. So, actually, I shouldn't have loaded the game data. There's not really nothing of interest in the game data. For custom cosmetics, the interesting stuff, you just literally use a blank game data. Game data is not the point. In fact, as you probably noticed with custom cosmetics, and this is specifically if it's flagged as custom cosmetics category type, the user doesn't even choose to activate them manually. They're automatically activated. What custom cosmetics really are is the client has a list of mod IDs that it considers custom, and it tells the server, hey, I'd like to apply this custom cosmetic mod ID and then a subvariant cosmetic ID if desired to an item. And the server, if it has a whitelist enabled, checks that mod ID, that int64, against its whitelist. If it doesn't use a whitelist, it just says, fine, cool. And of course, our officials use a whitelist. just because we don't, want people putting super obscene things instantly onto the official servers. But essentially, all the server does is, if it passes the whitelist or if it doesn't use whitelist, replicates that ID, that number, to everybody else. And that's it. That's the only concept the server has for a custom cosmetic. And the reason that's important is we didn't want anybody messing up the servers. So it essentially allows people to, and then beyond that, when the clients receive the custom cosmetic ID, they use that to essentially swap out the item class, like the item actual blueprint, for a different one based on the custom cosmetics that they have loaded. If they find that ID, they will see if that ID tells them what remapping, you might say, of the item class to use. And that's done for costumes, for item skins, and also for structure skins as well, which is one of the cooler ones. Because structure skins, we went a little further with it, with the structure skinning system itself, and gave clients a lot of hooks that they can use to add a lot of new client-side functionality to the structures that the server doesn't know about, with a few kind of minor exceptions, and essentially allowing clients to have lots of arbitrary networking, even data saving, and as much client-side functionality as they can pack into that. And I'll go over some of the ways in which that works for structures shortly. But for costumes, it's pretty simple. So really, like I said, there's nothing in the primal game data. It's just a blank one. But the mod data, you're going to want to enter these into your mod custom cosmetics entries. And this table essentially defines, the string is not really used. It's just so you don't get, confused. Nobody actually sees these strings, but this is more for the developers' quick reference. And then this basically says, look, if somebody is applying this mod ID to this item, then this item is going to be replaced with this item. And this is an item, special one now, that the players have in their cosmetics menu always, called the custom player costume. We did it because we wanted people to easily be able to apply a costume without having to get another costume first. So custom costumes get applied really. You could set it up differently, but this is the most convenient way. So custom player costume, and we're gonna remap it to Mickey if they apply it. And then, because people kind of expect to apply a custom costume to a shirt as well, I mean, ARK, basically, costume can be equipped directly by itself, or can be dragged onto a shirt. Then they can also apply it. We're going to remap shirt to Mickey as well. This does mean, though, to not actually do a full remapping. This means to only remap the item skin itself. So if you uncheck this, it actually on the client will completely replace the class with the it'll replace this apply to classes with the actual class here. There is some utility for that related to weapon skins, which we will go over probably in a subsequent video. I have to set up an example of those. This can be used for weapon skins as well. But for costumes, these kinds of cosmetics, you want to have this checked. Otherwise, it would actually lose on the client. It wouldn't affect the server, but on the client, it would lose the underlying functionality, if any, of the original item, which wouldn't be ideal. People expect skins just to be skins, not actually losing any item functionality that the original item had. Important thing, so basically cosmetics should have this checked. You do need to increment the cosmetic ID for every additional one that applies to the same item. So since we have two entries in this overall array that apply to player costume custom, the second one gets cosmetic ID 1. Probably could have figured that out automatically, but we rely on you, the intrepid creator, to do that for us. If you don't, the end user won't be able to properly select them from the UI. So I recommend you do, or it's just not going to work very well for the user. So since this is the second entry for player costume custom, we incremented this to 1. Since this is the second entry for the shirt, we increment this to 1. So it's Mickey and Minnie. And the good news is, other than that, the actual costumes are just literally your regular old character skins. This is like any other character skin costume. There's nothing special about it whatsoever. All the magic is in that mod data asset. So there is something a little bit fun that we did for Mickey that maybe you guys should know about, which is this one inherits not from the regular costume class, which I think is costume test. This one inherits from primal item skin character base and has a special component that it uses. Actually, I don't know why there's two entries. I think that's kind of weird. I think one of these entries might just be a mistake. Oh, the FPV, of course. Derp. Um, but the TPV mesh is actually a special blueprint class. You can look at this class. It's just a blueprint class, and it disables the character bone modifiers in the blueprint. It basically, in that special skeletal component blueprint, it says when I'm applied, I'm going to disable the blueprint modifier, the bone modifiers, because we really thought Mickey looked pretty weird and did never look quite right when people just had arbitrary bone modifiers on them. Well, actually, that's not entirely the case. Really, what it was is we needed Mickey to be way smaller, and so we had to apply our own bone modifiers to get the regular character skeleton size squished down to Mickey size. I actually do think subsequently we really should apply the character's bone modifiers in addition to that or multiplied by that so that then you kind of get your bone modifiers operating subsequently in Mickey's transform space, which would be cool because then you default human becomes default Mickey, but then beyond that you still can get weird scale Mickeys. We would just have to add some additional logic into the blueprint to do that and some native support for that. We'll probably do that in a subsequent update to this. But if in case you're wondering, that's what makes this costume special, and that's half of that functionality is in this item skin character skin base, and the other half the functionality is in this special skeletal mesh component. If you don't want to be overriding the bone modifiers, you're best just to use regular costume test. I think you guys have probably seen before, and inherit from that, and just uh, override the item attachments like any other of our costumes do. Right, so that is the basic costume one, and really, I don't have an example here. I'll probably upload one later, but it's the exact same thing for Dino costumes. There is a Dino costume custom that players have in their inventory, and you would just set up the exact same way. And you can just copy any of our existing Dino costumes into your mod and tweak all the values to make Dino costumes work as a custom cosmetic. They do right now. I think I'll upload one tonight, maybe as part of the Crazy Cosmetics pack as an example. But we highly recommend making Dino costumes using this system. We think people really like those, and that way they can get to use them on any server. Let's talk about the Crazy Cosmetics, which do something a little different because Crazy Cosmetics shows more examples of applying the system to arbitrary items, not just to costumes. So there in Crazy Cosmetics, I included some examples of structures and hats. Let's talk about the hats first. So the hats, it's really simple. Again, it's just onto the base helmet. And again, since there's a lot of these, you'll see that the cosmetic ID keeps going up and up and up because you have to increment it for every one that is applied to the same kind of item. It's the only way it knows to like uniquely address them within the overall mod in terms of replicating to the client. So you'll see the cosmetic ID keeps incrementing, and just checking I'm still recording audio. I am. And essentially it's just saying to the base helmet, we are going to skin it with this. And these are just regular old item skins. There is nothing special about them. I did inherit from a base class because I was setting up a bazillion of these with my good buddy Rob. I didn't want to have to kind of constantly enter all the base data over and over and over again. But even on this base one, you'll see it literally just inherits from item skin generic, like you've all seen. There's nothing special about it. So that's it really for this. This is, male and female here. I put female first because the male one needs to work on the dinos and the player pawn. So basically female first, and then actor really is just the filter for dinos and player characters because Otherwise, if it hit actor, it would first, then the female would get the actor. So female first, then actor in my example, and this will allow it to work on the dinos and the player character male, which seem to really share the same offset effectively. And then after that, I just swapped out the mesh. Make sure, by the way, please, when you're doing these, use with soft ref versions. Always use the with soft ref versions of the components, skeletal and static, because it saves memory. If you don't use the with soft ref versions, it hard loads the assets um, on game startup, and a giant waste of memory. If you use the soft ref versions, our native code takes care of dynamically loading those assets only when the item is actually equipped, and that saves tons of memory when you've got many item classes loaded. So really, these need to be soft ref, and it's important, I think, that everybody try to follow these standards, because as we approve custom cosmetics for whitelisting on official servers, we're going to be examining them to make sure they conform to these standards. So if you want your custom cosmetic to be whitelisted for officials, please follow those the rules I've been mentioning. And we really appreciate it, and it will allow us to whitelist your cosmetic. Other than like, hey, it's not offensive, it's not copyright infringing, and it conforms these technical standards, we're gonna whitelist everything. Because after all, it can't hurt the servers. So anyway, yeah, female, and then really after just swapping out the mesh, all I did was change transforms a bit, because sometimes the female one needed a little bit more offsetting or a little bit different scale, but it took me like 30 seconds to set each one up. So along with Rob, who did probably a lot more than I did. So yeah, this was a lot of fun, and that's basically how you can apply it as a skin onto any item. So you could make skins for other armor pieces. You could make a complete armor set piece skin pack. It's you know how to do that. It's just I just did hats because they were static, and I happened to have the assets were easy to find on Marketplace, thanks to the wonderful creators of them. But if you want to make more complex skinned assets or use those for the other arm pieces, same setup as you've already seen and many people have made as mod authors. Right, let's talk about structures. So structures is a bit different. They need to be set up in a very specific way to work. You have to, when you set up a structure, add two item classes. It's really two kinds of classes. It's really, when you think about these are these remaps. It's like, think of it as remaps. This is the classes to remap, and these are the things to remap them to. And so it basically says remap this item to this one, and remap this structure to this one. And for a structure skin, you have to set it up just like this. Probably we could have made it figure some of this out dynamically, but we didn't. So its structure skin is really always going to have this one as the first one. It's always going to be item structure skin generic. There's no reason not to, and if you make it something else, it's just really not going to work right. And then this is your own structure skin class, just for the item though. So like that's, as you know, the item structure skin class is really nothing special at all. There's pretty much nothing unique in here. I do recommend maybe duplicating this crazy cosmetics one. I would recommend turning off can slot. If you don't, it kind of like, put it this way, it doesn't behave super well if you have can slot. So I'd recommend making your settings on your item skin, your item skin custom cosmetic look like this. Can slot, prevent deposit dropping. Don't want to equip, that would be best. But look, this next one is just, it's really nothing. It literally just tells it the structure to build. So very hollow on the structure skin item side. The rest of it though is very not hollow, very deep functionality coming up. So this is the original structure class that you're going to expect your skin to be applied on. You have to put it not only here, but also, oh sorry, this is the skin it's actually going to use. So this is the original structure. Technically, that's also defined, as you probably know by now if you've worked with structure skins, in the skin class. It is, I really hope you can see these pop-up windows, man. If you guys can't see these pop-up windows, I'm totally effed. Okay, so when we left off, I had just realized my pop-ups, my like additional window pop-ups weren't working. So we're gonna double back and cover some of the things that I think would have been really confusing without those windows being visible to you guys. Specifically, I'm gonna go over some of the custom cosmetic setup again, and then get into structure skins. So the things you couldn't see here. I assume you can see this window now, right, audience?
Sure can, yeah.
Great. Okay, so basically, this is the stuff you're missing. It's nothing super, probably was somewhat obvious what I was saying, but in this mod data, this one ain't used. That's just for the creators, organizational purposes. What players actually see in the game is the item name. Um, this is kind of like a remap. This is the original class. That's what the custom cosmetics are basically doing, is they're remapping classes client side. Uh, This remaps the costume custom, which is the special costume that players not always have in their inventory. That is really you guys should use for remapping costumes. You don't technically have to use that for costumes, but if you don't, we may not whitelist it on our officials because we want them to follow the standards on our officials. Remaps it to a Mickey skin costume in this case. You have to check this for costumes for it to work properly. Again, if you don't, it'll create some weird behaviors. You might be fine, but we wouldn't necessarily be able to prove it for use on officials otherwise. When you do a costume, you also want to apply a remap to the base shirt as another entry because I almost wonder if I could just put both classes in the same entry. Haven't tried it, probably would work, but let's just say I put it in a different entry here. Remap space shirt to Mickey as well. Again, probably possible to just put it as, man, I'm so tempted. Anyway, might work to put it as like two arrays there. Let's just find out. Delete and all right, so what we're gonna do here, and the reason this has one is if you have multiple entries in the array for the same items, you have to increment it. Otherwise, it gets confused. So since I've got this item and this item, like if you have multiple apply to classes, like multiple entries, if you have multiple things that can be assigned to the same classes, you need to increment the cosmetic ID. So Minnie can be assigned to the same classes as Mickey, hence Minnie needs a different cosmetic ID. If there's any overlap between the apply to classes, if in doubt, we joke, just give it an incremental cosmetic ID. We could have probably done it automatically, but there you are. Just we probably should have pasted off the index in the array. Just increment the cosmetic ID all the time for every one of these. You'll be fine if you do that. But it's technically meant to signify unique things that can be applied to the same class. All right, so let me see if that actually worked. I'm just gonna hop into the test map on Steamboat Willie. If you load up the test map for your custom cosmetics mod, if you have any in the mod data asset array, which is, again, this is just the primal game data has no meaning for a custom cosmetic. It's all this custom cosmetics or entries array in the mod data. That's the only thing that has any meaning for a custom cosmetics mod, which are again automatically loaded, as I mentioned earlier. But to test it out, just load up the automatically generated test map area, and it will be used on your test map area. So you can just use that as a quick and easy way to see if it works. So that obviously works. That obviously works, but does it work to put it on a base shirt? Or rather on any shirt. So if I see. Yeah, that's nice. We just figured something out. we I wrote this, so I probably should have known that already, but yeah, we could just add the shirt and the original costume, like the full on costume. So you don't actually have to double up on these and make separate entries. You can just put them in the apply to class array. So that's actually a better setup for costumes. You just put them both into the same apply to classes, the costume and the shirt. All right, so that's costumes. That's pretty much all there is. Something else I was mentioning earlier, for players anyway. Something else I was mentioning earlier is that there's something a little special about the Mickey costume. You don't, if you're gonna just do a regular costume, just inherit from Primal Costume Test. I think is the one that we tend to use. What is it? Item costume test. Yeah, this primal item skin full costume test. That's what I'd recommend inheriting from if you're doing a normal one. This one's a special one that has some functionality that allows overriding of the bone modifiers. So for making a mini, like I mentioned earlier, we didn't want them to have custom bone modifiers, so we made a new class that kind of nukes those. That's this one. Don't use this one if you want to use the bone modifiers. Inherit like you would for any other costume from this one if full costume test if you want to do regular costume. And the only other special thing that I mentioned was the Mickey costume also used this extra special skeletal mesh component character skin, and all that does again is it nukes the bone modifiers. If you don't want to nuke the bone modifiers, just use a regular skeletal mesh component. Soft ref, always use soft ref, please. Otherwise, we can't approve it for officials. Static mesh component with soft ref, skeletal mesh component with soft ref. All right. While we're on the subject of costumes, let's just show you how to do a dino one real fast. Add another entry to this array here. Paste in what I already had set up. Technically, obviously, this would be a costume that would be located in your mod folder, not a regular costume we ship the game with. So you wouldn't really use this one, but there's one important thing about this costume that you have to set. It's just a regular dino costume. There's nothing special about it except you can make any dino costume you want the way you know how by just inheriting from primal item costume generic, except that is item skin. Super important. Also, definitely set this up. This you can either use the tags or the classes. Either is fine. Funny thing about the classes though, if you want it to apply to like multiple kinds of dinos, you could, use inheritance to like I don't know why I decided to use classes here. You can use classes or tags. Either will work. You do have to use one of those filters though. They're important. If you don't, we probably won't be able to approve it. There's no dino costume then I don't think that'll work on all dinos. Maybe there is if you just added like a hat on or something. I guess there is. If you use the dino costume, just like add an additional attachment and not hide the original dino mesh, then it could be a costume that applies pretty much to all dinos. So in which case you'd just put like dino character VP in there. That'd be the use of the class as opposed to a tag. Anyway, just a regular dino costume. It just has to have his item skin. That's very important. Regular costumes maybe don't need that. I don't think dino costumes just get equipped directly. This one for the custom cosmetics has to have that. And so just make your own dino costume. Otherwise, like any normal dino costume, put it in your mod folder, and then it's this setup. Like I said earlier, probably best to increment the cosmetic ID for every one of these just for shits. And it'll work now. So let's try it out. Boom. Spawn. Oh, don't crash on me. Drag the window in a weird way. Uh, yeah, doesn't look very good because we haven't updated the artwork yet, I guess. But you get the idea. Um, so you might ask, what is the point of the custom cosmetic system in general? Like, why not just regular mod? Two key reasons. One, they automatically activate. So if people have them, and they can, the main one is they can be used on any server. Just to be blunt about it. Our servers, we whitelist, like I mentioned earlier, everyone that gets submitted that works, meets our basic technical specifications that I mentioned earlier, and doesn't have anything copyright infringing or obscene in it. We will whitelist all of them in that case. And servers, if they choose to enable the system and they don't even have to use a whitelist, in which case all custom cosmetics that people have installed will just show up. And the structure ones in particular can be very powerful, as we'll shortly see. The second thing, though, is we are soon, hopefully in the next month or so, going to enable an option to automatically download these things, which we will have enabled on our servers. Servers can choose to enable it on it'll in fact we're going to enable it by default, so servers can opt out of it if they don't want to allow custom cosmetics to be auto downloaded or to use them at all. Clients will also be able to turn off auto downloading as well as block specific cosmetics, but the auto downloading system itself is really the key thing, because it's going to allow these cosmetics to essentially feel like they're part of the natural game and that you discover them organically as you play, as opposed to like having to go and manually find them all and download and install them all beforehand. So that's the key. That's the benefit of custom cosmetics. And if you set them up now in these days and weeks, they're automatically going to work with the automatic download system in when that comes online in a little over a month. So you can get ahead of the curve by making them this way. There's really no reason that a pure cosmetic shouldn't use this system, because it will benefit massively in terms of the expanded player availability by the automatic downloading system. And that's what really makes it feel more like a natural part of the game. Right. So thus custom cosmetics, instead of just setting it up the old way where it was a straight up, stackable mod. That's cool, especially if you need to go beyond the aesthetics and have core functionality. Well, then make a mod. But if you just want to do cosmetic stuff, this is the way to go. And structure skins can go a little bit beyond purely visuals, obviously. So let's that's the dino skin. Let's take a quick look at the item one and like a weapon, and then we're gonna take a look at hats, just in terms of how an item skin works. We'll do a hat one next, and then we'll take a look deep dive at structures. And so for hats, I had set up this big kind of test mod called Crazy Cosmetics. And in the mod data asset, you can see I put some structures in here as well that we'll go over, but lots and lots and lots of hats. And they pretty much nothing special about them. They just say to the base helmet, you can apply this skin. It is important to have this checked, otherwise it does an item replacement, which leads to weird functionality. The server doesn't know about it. The client thinks the item has weird properties, wouldn't suggest it. You can do it. We just wouldn't necessarily approve it for officials if you do not have this checked for, again, costumes and item skins. Structure skins should actually have this not checked, and so should weapon skins, and I'll show you that in a moment. But yeah, so just it says make the base helmet, any helmet that is, base helmet, allow it to be skinned with this. And as I was saying earlier, there's not too much special that this is just like a normal item skin, like it literally inherits from item skin generic. I made a base one for my convenience because I didn't feel like setting this up over and over again. So the only thing I changed, you could change this in yours if you want in the base class. Didn't allow it to be. I don't even think these have any effect. I requires explicit owner tags player, which is kind of interesting because I don't think that gets used. Like it's a skin, so it doesn't actually get equipped directly. It's that helmet. Like I don't think this means anything, because you apply it onto the helmet, and the helmet is what has the explicit who can use it and not. Because if this was used, you wouldn't be able to put it on dinos, and I surely know you can. So anyway, look, that's not used. This just said this is normal item skin stuff. Set it up this way. This has two entries. This one's kind of important. It has one for female, which is always going to need a little bit of fussing to get it to look right. Socket's a little different than the male skeleton. And then the second one is actor, and that basically allows it to attach to either a dino or the male player, which, from what I can tell, seem to use consistent socket offsetting on both of those. So female first, actor second, and then I left this blank. I didn't actually fill out the component to attach. I think it doesn't work right if you fill it out on the parent class. So I left it blank on the parent class here. And this is all just standard skin stuff. And then the child class of each hat that I made and Rob made, we just filled out the, pretty much the only thing we changed, again, soft ref please, was the mesh and the offsets for female and male. And I think we just put this on the hat socket, if I remember correctly. That's probably what it says here, hat socket. So obviously if it was a skinned asset, then it's really the same thing, except it's a skeletal mesh component with soft ref and not a static mesh component. And I think it has a few different flags to just use animation parenting or animation parent pose or something like that. So it's slightly different flags for like a skeletal mesh, but you've all seen it for like the mana core armor, for example, is an example that we ship with the base game of skinning an armor piece. So same idea. Just skeletal mesh with soft ref, please. And I don't think these offsets will be useful for a skeletal mesh that uses the animation parent. Um,
I do have a question about
yeah,
the skeletal mesh.
yeah,
So you can attach an animation blueprint, I assume, right?
yes, you can, of
Okay,
course.
so physics and all of that will work
Yes,
without.
if
Okay.
you do, because it just use it like any skin, it just nukes it just completely uses the actor or class attachment infos array. So if you give it a skeletal mesh and you give it an animation blueprint, it applies the animation blueprint to the skeletal mesh. We have hats and stuff that do that. Let's try it out. I mean, it surely will work, but let's give it a shot. So the way we're going to tease this is we are going to steal one that we already know uses a like a hat that uses an animation blueprint for physics. Which ones? I know we have one or two that does that. I think the metal one does for the clanging metal piece on the back or something. So item, metal, helmet. It's somewhere. Here we go. Item, metal, helmet. And if I remember correctly, in the attachment infos, there is an animation class. This is a skeletal mesh, so it's pretty much exactly what you described. I just chose this because it's a hat, so I don't have to change what it's inheriting from. But obviously, it could be torso armor or leg armor or whatever. So it's a skeletal mesh, much like you would expect with this animation class. Is this a rigid? Let me see if this uses animation pose. All right, so this is okay. Good. This doesn't use a socket. I think that's only for the one on the dyno. Is that third one? So this probably uses parent anims. Actually, if I remember correctly, it's the settings are the animation blueprint itself has a copy parent animation pose node in it. Was how it's done for these ones. You can probably look at the animation blueprint, but it's literally like a special node in there. And then I think this probably doesn't use like any special flags for the attachment. It's just like attached to actor. I think the animation graph is what does the actual pose copying in that case. So I think this is
By default, it uses parent anims, but when you do a
yeah,
copy pose mesh, you set the attached parent or use attached parent in the BP.
yeah, but I think this one probably just grabs it like directly from the actor and
Yeah,
says copy the actor mesh. Let's see. Copy pose from mesh.
there should be a setting there, and that's usually, yeah.
Yeah.
There you
So
go.
I mean, like literally, it's all done in the blueprint. Is my point. So, if we wanted it to have physics, this is the right setup. The hat or other components are the ones you'd copy from, and you can make a duplicate of the animation blueprint. But let's just check that it works, because it damn well should. So, all right. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna grab one of those hats that I have, like this one, and I'm just gonna deal, I'm gonna change this to skeletal mesh component with soft ref. Okay. And then I gotta set this to, I don't think I can copy and paste the whole component. I think it doesn't like that. So I'll just have to grab some of the values that are of interest to me. These ones. I think that's pretty much it. And then I need to make sure I have the same kind of attachment where it's just all like nothing there except the defaults. I don't think there's any of these. Socket to attach to is okay. That's actually, yeah, none, none. All right. Let me do that. So, oh, that wasn't the one. None. All right, that should do it in theory. So now if we put the chef hat on, it will look like the metal helmet, and it should have physics on the back of it. Let's find out. Please don't crash on me. Except, so since this is an item skin, again, in the mod data asset, it's set up to apply the base helmet. I don't actually use this. This is the custom costume class, so nothing there. So I give myself any helmet like cloth hat, cloth helmet, and then I get this giant list that is not very helpful. We're gonna be cleaning this up, guys. Promise. Promise, promise, promise. But for now, it will allow us to get on with the work. So there we are. You can also press, I think, C to cycle through them. Let's see if, yeah. So you can see it's changing the name. Bucket hat, chef. Oh, it's just there, chef hat. Anyway, yeah, we're gonna make a whole nice dedicated UI to apply these things. Um, anyway, it looks like the metal hat to me. Let's see if it has the physics on the back. Oh yeah, it's the physics on the side actually. Yeah, see that? It's amazing, isn't it? Utterly amazing. So yeah, it works to use animation blueprints with physics on it. Really, these are just regular items. There's nothing special about them. It's a cheat that allows the client to redirect the template at the last possible moment to some other skin. Make sense? There's really no difference than setting up any other item skin that you ever would. If it works on an item skin done normally, it'll work through this. The only exception is it has to be flagged as an item skin, which I don't think costumes necessarily normally need that, but they have to. You set the is item skin bool to true on the item class itself. That's the only like kind of unique thing for costumes anyway. Um, so that's how to skin items like any piece of armor or the costume itself. Again, the costume needs two entries, one for the player costume needs two entries, one for the player costume item and one for base shirt so that you can put it on a base shirt, put it on a shirt with the, by clicking apply cosmetic to the shirt itself. Uh, show you how to do dino costumes, showed you how to do in effect armor pieces with this. Let me show you how to do weapons, and then we're gonna move on to structures. So weapons are a bit interesting. Just gonna add another entry to this array here and paste in some values that I had already handy. All right, so this was my little example at making a turkey club, but one that would actually function entirely as a custom cosmetic and not need to be included with the regular game. So this part of it is simple enough. Weapons you actually do not want to apply as item skin. It's important because there's a lot of blueprint functionality to get it to work right, and as an item skin, it would be insufficient. So you basically need the first thing you need to do is you must when you make so you don't want to have it as an item skin, and you put the original item that you want to kind of skin. In this case, I want to skin the stone club weapon, and you make your own child of it. This is very important. Weapon skins using the custom cosmetic system must be children of the item they intend to replace. That is because they're literally replacing the item client side. So if they're not if they're not a child, they'll lose all kind of necessary parent functionality. So make a child blueprint of the weapon item you intend to replace. You cannot change out the weapon class. That's not how it works because it's not about replacing the weapon during the world. That wouldn't work for the server. So you're not actually going to be replacing the weapon class in the world with a custom cosmetic weapon skin. Instead, what you're going to do is, and there's relatively little else, you can see from the change values here, you're going to set use blueprint equip notifications to true. You are going to add a attachment for first and third person that is basically, and I'll try to include this as part of Crazy Cosmetics, so I'll probably pick a different asset so that it's more fun to look at than the Turkey Club. You're going to have one that attaches to the first person hands. And look, you could actually hide the first person hands and use a fully skinned mesh if you wanted to, but for me it was easier to just stick a static mesh in place of the original weapon mesh. So this is the first person static mesh, and this is the third person static mesh. And I think I probably put them on sockets. Uh, well, the third person one just attaches directly where the weapon was. The first person one, you're going to want to find an appropriate socket on the original weapon skeleton that seems appropriate for where you want your static mesh to go. It could be a skeletal mesh with an animation blueprint if you want. That might actually work just as well. Butts with the relative offsets here for first and third person to kind of get it to line up right. And then I think I must have done something to hide the original weapon mesh. Oh, that's what I did in Blueprint. That's right. That was fun. So set up your icon, just like any other weapon item. And then the last piece of the puzzle is hiding the original weapon via Blueprint. Fun times. So basically, you don't have to worry about unhiding them because when to unequip it, you have to just like to remove the skin, you have to just unequip the weapon. We don't allow skins to be removed dynamically when the weapon is in hand. But we do have to hide the original weapon when it's equipped, and otherwise it would show up on top of our replacement mesh. So effectively, and this leaves the hands visible, but not the weapon mesh itself. So you can literally just copy paste this blueprint. We'll include in the dev kit or screen grab it. It's pretty simple. Blueprint equipped. If we have a weapon and we're not the dedicated server, why waste performance in the dedicated server? Besides, this won't even run the dedicated server. It's not the server doesn't know about it. Set hide weapon mesh to hide FPV mesh to true on the weapon actor, and then you also have to do this wacky shit. You have to set new visibility to false on the first and third person mesh, and set cast shadow to false only on the third person mesh. Okay. So basically this will do it. This completely gets the original weapon mesh out of play while keeping the hands so that you can essentially stick whatever else you want in the hands. So let's try it out. This is like literally just what you always want, only way to do it. I couldn't put this in a base class because you have to inherit. I guess I could have put it in like a very, very root based class and made a bool for it, whatever. I figured sometimes maybe you want to keep the original weapon mesh visible and then add additional things. That's also possible. But if you want to hide the mesh, you just want to replace it, inherit from the item of the weapon itself, set that blueprint equip notification. Might be nice to call the parent, honestly, just in case the original weapon, original item VP actually needed to do something as well. But that's it. And so then back to my data asset, this is going to make the club into our special club. And obviously this would all be located in your mod. And don't apply weapon cosmetics as a skin because they actually really do need to have the functionality to replace. And let's try it out. So amazing, right? I know it's not that cool because we already actually, I think, had this for Thanksgiving. But but think of all the other things you could do now. I mean, that could be like a bone or something, or a giant new sword. So you can have some fun with these. And of course, they could be skeletal meshes with animation blueprints. All right, so that's how to do weapon cosmetics with this system. Let's talk about structures because they're the coolest one, actually.
I do
We
have a
got some,
question
yeah. Hmm.
about the. So, could you, in theory, also blueprint the item skins, like the armor and stuff, and have it on skinned, for
You could
example, or on
you
equip?
100%, 100%. But if you do that, you're kind of limiting yourself to one specific armor replacement. Think about it. Because some of the armors actually have functionality built into their blueprint. And so it would only work properly if you inherited from the specific armor piece that you want to skin. Because you couldn't necessarily have it apply to all shirts because all shirts is base shirt. You know what I mean? That's the challenge. Since all shirts, you have metal shirt, tech shirt, hide shirt, and so if you wanted to not have it be an item skin, you would only be able to pick from one class. You could potentially, you could say, well, I could put all the kinds of classes in this array. That's true, but you're only going to be replacing it with one item. That's a problem because some of these shirts, like the tech shirt, I tell you has blueprint in there that it needs to run. It needs to run that blueprint on the client as well, or shit is going to not work properly. So there is another thing you could do if you really wanted. I'm not against it per se. Is you could make a one of your skins for every one of the torso armor. So you could have, let's say you wanted to make magic armor skin. You could have magic armor skin metal, magic armor skin tech, and that way you could inherit from the respective blueprint for each one of those. You know what I mean? So you magic armor skin metal would inherit from metal shirt. Or magic armor shirt would inherit from metal shirt. Magic armor metal shirt would inherit from regular metal shirt. Magic armor tech shirt would inherit from regular tech shirt. That way you're replaying. That way you're keeping all of the original functionality that the original item may have had, which in some cases is actually important functional blueprint. Um, that's only necessary if you really didn't want to click the cosmetic applies item skin. What advantage would there be if you were to not have an item skin? Technically, as you probably know, maybe the reason you asked the question, you can get more functionality that way. You get a lot of events that the item blueprint can capture and react to in fun ways that you simply don't get right now as an item skin. So that's neat. But I want to remind you, this does not run on the server. That's an important point. That's the whole point of the system. So if you do that, anything that you're doing is only for client side enjoyment. Um, in practice, there's not as much as you might think that you really want to do um, client side with this system. You might say, well, why not have it on the server? Because that would defeat the entire point. If we let end users run code directly on the servers, they'll crash in about 30 seconds and run
But
poorly.
yeah, so if
So
you wanted to do something fairly simple, like change the Foley sound to from metal to leather, uh,
yeah,
and,
then you
and
then if we don't support it as an item skin traditionally, you may need to replace the actual blueprint. Not
okay,
necessarily against it. It's just like I said, you would have to probably do it tediously by putting in all the respective kinds of armors that it could replace and making a unique blueprint for each one of them. The better solution, and one that I think we're going to continue to do over time, is give all of the same exact hooks into the item skin system as we have into the item system itself. So essentially, the item system would be able to route every single event into the skin, so the skin would basically get full replacement capability. That's something we want to do over time. Obviously, right now it's pretty limited. It's mostly core visual replacement. Um, but one thing that does strike me is there might already be this. In fact, I think there is. I think there's an item skin applied to item function, if I remember correctly, and it runs on the static class default object of the skin, I think, but it passes in, I believe, the item object that it's being applied to. Let me see this. And if that's the case, you can effectively just use that to override whatever you want value-wise on the instance of the object. Let's find out. Skin. Applying skin onto item. Oh yeah. All right. So this is a way to achieve what you wanted, uh, without having to do the tedious thing of like actually making a unique blueprint for every item it could be applied onto. So what I'm saying here is, if you wanted to replace the Foley sound to answer your question, you could just implement this event on the skin. It'll be called on the skin. It gets called in the static class default object. So what you do though is you pass this to whatever you want, shirt base or something. Pass to shirt base shirt. There we go. And then set whatever values you want it. Change out all the sounds, anything that there is, right? So my point is, you could change all the values you want this way on the parent class. What you can't do there entirely is hook into any events the item might have. That'd be cool, but we got to add a little more functionality for that. So if you really must have all those events that the underlying item would get, then your best bet is to not apply as a skin, but to make a custom variant for every kind of armor that it might need to be applied to. Okay? Essentially a subclass of each respective armor type. Metal shirt, tech shirt, cloth shirt. And that's only necessary if you really needed access to additional item events that you couldn't get otherwise. Make sense?
yeah, that makes
All
sense.
right, cool. Because yeah, if you don't check this bool, it'll actually straight up do a replacement of the item class client side. Not gonna lie, it's cool. I mean, you can get some additional functionality that way. Look, what's the worst thing that could happen? You mess up some clients. Please don't mess up some clients, or we might not be able to whitelist it. Has to work for us to whitelist it. All right. So anyway, moving on. Structures. These are fun. These are incredibly powerful. Like I may only even scratch the surface of what they can do here. We will see. Chat, you're still recording, right? Just checking. All right, excellent. So, structures. Structures do not get set up as an item skin. Don't check that. The first entry here is always going to be structure skin generic because that's what gets it to be applied to the structure skin that we now include on the default player. The second entry should be the structure that it can be applied to. Really, you could theoretically have multiple entries here. If you did, they would have to map though to come on, where is it? This structure skin supported structures. So the reality is if you had multiple ones here, fair enough, then you would have the exact same entries from index 1 onwards. This and any additional ones would match this and any additional ones. So if I had 3 entries here, I'd put 3 entries from this down. But this only going on the one chair, so 1 entry right here. Then you put the item here. This is like any other um, structure skin. You literally are just going to inherit from structure skin generic, which we include in the base game. I would prefer that when you do, you set can slot to false. It keeps things cleaner. It makes it function more like it should within the UI, and set these as well. If you don't, it's not going to break the game. It's just going to make the UI behave a little weird on the client side. And then I inherited from it again, and this is literally just saying, okay, this item makes this structure skin. You fill that out. It's like any structure skin. I mean, I didn't even have to really use the inheritance, but my point is structure to build this. The actual structure skin is the structure to build. So you put the structure skin item here, and then you put the structure it is actually going to build, the structure skin rather, that it's going to place, which is the same, should be the same, needs to be the same as what is listed here in the item. If you do not make these the same, it will not work. The client uses this array as a validation method. It needs to be set up like this. So it just literally the client won't apply it, especially in a networked environment. So the original structure skin item, any structures it can work on, and the actual structure skin item that we're going to replace it with, that we're actually going to be using as a cosmetic, and then the actual structure skin BP that it is going to put into the world. Right. So try it out, and then let's talk a little bit more about structure BPs. So obviously the flow for this is boom, the player puts it down that way. You get to place it like a structure skin. Wow, amazing. And then since I set it to apply onto a wood chair, I got to put down a wood chair for it to be skinned. Right. That's that. A few things you got to know about structure skins. They don't spawn on the server, obviously. I mean, these structure skins don't. The ones we include with the base game, hell, they don't even really spawn on the structure server on the server then anyway. It actually just has a reference to the class, and it gives the class default object, an opportunity to run some logic to change out visuals on the structure. So that's really all a structure skin is. That's why we call it a skin and not an actual replacement. If it was freaking replacing the actual structure actor in the world, then it would really just be replacing a structure. Skin means it's just getting an opportunity to run some logic, change out some visuals. And then these custom cosmetic ones, like any custom cosmetic, the server doesn't even know about them. It just knows an ID, and it just the client applies the skin locally if it happens to have that mod installed. So that's pretty much the basic idea of the structure skins and indeed the custom cosmetic ones, which are just, again, purely a client side kind of last minute change out. Let's talk more about what they can do, though. That's the fun part. So, firstly, the ones in the crazy cosmetics example, which I recommend looking at, are really nicely set up because for the structure BPs themselves, we inherited them in a nice way that I thought was better than before. Namely, we inherited them all from a base crazy cosmetics one, and we might put a version of this in the base game, but for now you can just move this into your own mod if you want to make structure cosmetics. What this is nice about this structure skin base crazy cosmetics one is it's all set up for quick mesh swaps, and that's the nice thing. Like otherwise doing even a mesh swap was like you had to like re-implement all this stuff in Blueprint. I mean, we tried to like give you a lot of power, but that also meant like it wasn't that obvious how to just do a mesh swap. And so with the if you inherit your structure skin blueprint from this crazy cosmetics one, which again you'd have to move it in your own mod because you can't do cross mod inheritance, then all you have to do for a mesh swap is change out a few values. It's so quick and convenient. I mean, look at how little we actually have modified in this class. The name of the skin, the structure it applies to. Again, you have to set that up in the mod data asset as well. That's necessary as a quick lookup table. And the item it consumes. I don't even know if that's relevant. Maybe. Fair enough. The item it consumes. Again, if you mess with that, don't worry, guys. It's not going to be running the server, so it doesn't matter for a custom cosmetic. And then it's just literally the material that you're going to override and the static mesh are going to override, and offset, scale, and rotation for the static mesh. Obviously, for many structure skins, you'd want to do much more than that, but probably like the vast majority of them are just mesh swaps. And you can, have a lot of fun with just mesh swaps. Obviously, if you look at Crazy Cosmetics, we have a whole living room full of mesh swaps. So I highly recommend if you're just interested in doing mesh swaps, which is most of them, just inherit, copy over this, move it to your own mod, and inherit from it, and then you only have very little data you actually have to fill out in all of your children structure skins, which I get this, and it's just so much easier for a quick mesh swap. I want to show you some of the more advanced things that structure skins can do, though, because mesh swaps is cool and all, but they can do a hell of a lot more than that. I'm trying to think, though, if I'm forgetting it. Oh, yeah. One more thing. We added an item to the game called decor boxes, and you might be like, why the hell do we add those? They are just like these little abstract boxes of 3 separate sizes. They don't have any blocking collisions, so don't try to use them to annoy people by blocking their bases. They won't be effective for that. I know that would be the first things people would try to do. So yeah, they don't block collision. But they are fun because they can be stuck to any surface. They can store 1 item in them, and they are basically intentionally for providing a nice container for placeable structured doodads, you might say. Cups, pillows, little doodads you just kind of want to stick everywhere that would not normally map very well to an existing ARK structure. We have like obvious pieces of furniture in the ARK base game, but when it came to just like things that need to fit into weird places or have they can attach to any surface. You can rotate them around the normal on any surface, and there's 3 different sizes, and it's actually beneficial for skin creators because they can choose. They could apply to the base decor box if they want, which is the parent of the 3 sizes, or they can pick to only allow it to apply to one of the specific decor boxes, small, medium, or large. And what's nice about that is they don't have blocking collision. So if you need blocking collision, find an existing ARC structure that maps pretty well to it. If we get a decor box as blocking collision, I think we'd be asking for trouble. But they do have like an overall interaction area that corresponds nicely to that size. So for things, pick the one that basically matches you think nice enough to the interaction area you're expecting to your doodad to have. So like a small cup or a plate would use a small decor box. A dartboard hanging on the wall, an interactive dartboard, please, whoever is going to write that, would be the medium decor box. A giant turntable or something might be the large decor box, or maybe just use the actual collidable table that we have. So that's what decor boxes are. They are for structure skins. People can put them down and not apply a skin to them, and then they just look like these funky little wooden boxes in the world. Oh well. So have fun with that, please. Players get them in their engrams tab. It's a little simple craftable item. And then they do store 1 item in them. And the decor box has some functionality to query the item and essentially know about it even if the client hasn't opened their inventory, because anybody who works with the ARC code knows that clients don't know what's in an inventory container unless they open it first, or there's others very specific conditions, but they explicitly inherently do not actually know unless you code some additional logic for them to be aware of this. Decor boxes, you have to query them, but they will respond and you can access those query functions as a skin, and they can tell you what items in them, and then you can use that logic inside the skin to do stuff. That's how we wrote the gun rack. So I want to talk then, that leads me into what structure skins can do beyond just swapping visuals. Lots of cool shit. They can send network messages that are routed to all clients. Again, the server doesn't actually have the structure skin, especially for it does technically for non-cosmetic structure skins, ones we include. I don't think those are even that useful. It's the custom cosmetic structure skins that are the really cool stuff for creators. And even with the custom cosmetic structure skins that the server doesn't know about, you can send network messages. You have to do it in a specific way. I suggest everybody look at because now I don't think any of these simple ones that I include with crazy cosmetics does any functional stuff. They're all just mesh swaps. The really cool ones, example ones, are in the Dr. Cosmetic sample derp. And I mean, these are just so neat. Like David, perfect, took the system and ran with it. I mean, most of you guys probably already seen this, but I'll just show it to you for those who maybe haven't. Is it decor box or so I just put a decor box down. I think it's the medium one that it uses, and then weapon rack. And I could put this on a wall or anywhere, or whatever. And then how cool is that? So, and that's the server doesn't know anything about that. So that is done by some network messaging, and he made tic-tac-toe as well, which I think you've probably seen in one of the trailers. And so basically, structure skins and even cosmetic structure skins can send network messages in a certain way that gets routed to everybody. They can save persistent data, actually, that saves on the server. There's a limit of how much they can save and the kind of variables they can save, because that obviously we don't want people overflowing the server and so forth. So that's all limited, but it's enough to store some pretty serious data. And they have the replicated items. They can override, they can add and override the client's multi-use wheel and handle multi-use wheel interactions locally on the client, because it's all really for client-side functionality. That's the whole point. Now you might say, well, who's the authority if it's just everybody routing messages through a structure skin? Two things. One, inherently we only allow people who can access the structure to trigger any of the network messaging or set any of the persistent data, because the reality is that the reality is that we don't want people just running into somebody's base who's not welcome and just triggering weird ass messages on structure skins or overriding persistent data that might be relevant to the people who set up their nice home. You got to be able to access structure, I mean, actually have access rights, ranked access rights and so forth. So that's a basic line of defense. The second thing is, who cares? Basically, beyond that basic line of defense, it's intended for client-side cosmetic fun. So with like writing tic-tac-toe, we basically let like have a soft ownership concept that's implemented entirely client-side. First person interact with it, sends a network message out and some persistent data that says, hey, here's my ID, and I'm owning it for 5 minutes. And the logic is written so that the rest of the clients respect that. Obviously, a malicious client could not respect that, but like, wow, that means somebody took over your tic-tac-toe table. That's some seriously hardcore hacking there. Locally, your client-side tic-tac-toe table, meaning it's just for funsies. And the concept of soft client-side ownership coded within somebody's structure skin generally should be sufficient for what these are really all about. Bear in mind the structure skin functions that we're going to look at, they're all operating on the class default object of the structure skin. We do not instantiate it. So do not, unless you want to like crash the game or, I mean, crash the client game. It's not, like you'd be harming our servers. Don't try to modify any of the variables of the structure skin. It's a class default. It passes in the actual structure instance That's what you can work on. And we do supply a variable or struct really where you can use to cache local data on the client. There's basically a local variable cache and the persistent one on the server. And so let me show you a little bit of the functionality, say, associated with these. I have not actually looked at David's blueprints on these before. I wrote the basic system, but I bet these blueprints are pretty fun. So bear with me. These will be the first time I've seen some of these. Um, so this is just a standard apply and remove skin stuff. These events go through all structure skins. This allows you to change out the visuals if you don't inherit from like a simple class that does it. This is where you would change out the visuals. And you can see he's adding a bunch of components and so forth onto the structure. You know, again, it has to be done on the structure that's passed in, not on this. This is structure skin should never operate on itself. It's never going to be an instance object of its own. It's not actually replacing a structure. It's just modifying things on the structure. Um, So a few things here. This is the skin persistent data on the structure. This is the data that is actually stored on the server. You know, I actually had a nice simple structure myself that basically demonstrated all this that I'm more familiar with, that kind of demonstrated each step of the system. I called it the radio something something. It was just a thing to like play some music in a networked environment. Let me see if it still exists. Maybe I don't have it anymore. Let's find out. Um, could have sworn I called it radio something. Maybe it ended up though. I might have actually put it in here. Still there? Probably not. It might be simpler to take a look at the party lamppost. This just allows you to change some strobe effects on the light. But basically this one, you're going to see it's going to override the multi-use wheel. So it's going to add David with his very advanced stuff, but it's going to add some multi-use entries. All the entries it adds must be marked client side only because by definition, and it's a special function, get multi-use entries. By definition, uh, the server is not going to know about this. So you got to make them client side only, and then it gets the opportunity to handle them here. And then this is the key thing: it sends a network message to the server. The server isn't actually going to do anything with it though, because the server structure skin net message actually just routes it to all other players. That's all it does. The server's acting like a dumb routing mechanism because the server doesn't even know about this class. This is a way of telling all the other players, hey, here's what I'm doing to the structure. But in order for it to persist and for new players who weren't there already to know about it, it's also going to set this skin persistent data struct in the server. And I'm gonna guess he is going to build in the values properly on the yeah, here it is. He basically is setting the array. Yeah, he's basically modifying the array of the skin persistent data structure, and he's setting all this information into it that the clients can use. When you set the skin persistent data structure, it doesn't actually trigger a message on all the clients. So you can make a skinnet message to reprocess it, or like he's doing here, he can just send it out as part of the skinnet message. So they're the same thing basically. So you use the skin persistent data if you want to persist, you know, for newly joining clients or across save games, so that the data will still be there. There's a limited set of variables you can set in this, and you can also use the skin net message function to route messages to all of their clients. And that's the gist of it. That's the essence of it. With that, you can basically run as much logic as you need on all clients. When somebody interacts with something, you can also store data. And then again, there's one thing that he's not doing right here, which is you can actually set local data. There's really no function for it because it's locally accessible. I think it's called skin uh, local data. So you can basically modify local only skin custom persistent data, which is basically just a local cache of possible variables that might be of use. Um, it's just like a bunch of If you needed to store stuff between operations locally on the client, you didn't want to have to replicate the server. It was kind of a scratch pad because again, you can't make any um, persistent variables here. These are he hide. These are intended to be static only. I'm sure he's not using these. He's filled these out as preset values. If you can have local variables in a function, but I mean you don't want to have any writable class variables that you're using in a structure skin because it's class default object memory. So it wouldn't be per instance, obviously, then. So if you want per instance kind of cache scratch data on the client, put it here. This is not network. This is client side only for kind of having stuff in between functions. There's also, I think, a function to set up a timer that the skin will get triggered every so often. I think it's called skin timer because again, normally, so there's set structure skin timer and clear structure skin timer. And when it fires, it will fire this event. It will fire um, not start skin timer. It will fire some event. Um, yeah, BP structure skin timer triggered. So that's what will happen on the skin if you set this, and you can set to loop or not to loop. Technically, if you set like you can have a non-looping timer for the skin exist alongside a looping timer. We allow one of each, and then you can clear either clear all or clear looping or non-looping. If you use clear all, then this bool won't be meaningful. But yeah, my overall point is timers can be useful. If you ever wanted to make like a basketball game or something that had some actual need to run logic that felt like it was at an interval. You could set a timer to 0.01, which will tell you that it will trigger every frame, and then you can use delta seconds to actually run, what would feel like real time per frame logic. Again, how far you want to take that is up to you creators, but that is full ticking capability then client side for these skins should you need it. So you have the ability to send network messages to everybody. You have the ability to store persistent data on the server that saves. You have the ability to, and that replicates to everybody for newly joining clients to set up the correct state. You have the ability to query about the item within an inventory. You can see how the gun rack does that. You guys can open that up in the structure cosmetic example and examine that. You have the ability to store local variable data if you need to like have kind of a scratch pad between frames or between functions, and you have the ability to set timers. And of course, with the skin add, apply, and remove, you have the ability to change out all the visuals you want, add whatever components you need, and so forth. Since you can't necessarily persistently store the components, it looks like you just use get tag, get component with tag to get access to them when you need them. Oh well. Nobody said this was super performant, but it's fast enough for I think the purposes that it's intended for. So between all those functions, all those features, you pretty much could do anything with structure skins that you would ever really need to do client side, at least until we make it even more powerful. Hope you guys make some crazy stuff. The tic-tac-toe one made me feel like, man, we need checkers because tic-tac-toe is dumb. It always has a guaranteed, winner. So it's like checkers, chess, something a little more advanced than that, darts, whatever, poker, just or anything fun that is kind of client side amusement, dance floor, DJ, turntable, whatever. So that's it. I think for the structure skins, highly recommend tearing into what is there in the structure skin sample, cosmetic sample. There's also the glass one. Funnily enough, we had to separate the glass cosmetic one from the regular one because we realized the glass cosmetic was like a little too unfair. Would let you basically make like a wall transparent that people who didn't have the cosmetic wouldn't be as transparent, which would give you kind of a bit of a advantage over them in a PvP context. So with that being the case, splitting it up, we were able to add it to the whitelist only for PvE servers. That's why we split up the glass toggleable glass wall thing. We'll definitely continue to do that as people submit structure cosmetics. Any that look like they may be unbalancing or unfair in PvP would get the PvE only treatment. If you guys are making structure cosmetic packs and you are worried that some of them may be a little unbalancing on PvP, please split them up then, because we can't whitelist individual cosmetics within a mod. We can only whitelist the mod or not whitelist the mod. So if you have ones that are more like possibly unbalancing for PvP, then split them up into a different mod, and we can whitelist the PvP compliant ones that wouldn't really give an advantage, and while leaving PvE, who cares? It's all for fun. So I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to say about it. I really hope you guys have some. Oh yeah, and basically, obviously the most simple ones is just the cosmetic asset swap. So don't let any of the advanced features intimidate you. If you look at the crazy cosmetics and you see what we did with the base class, copy that base class structure skin base class from crazy cosmetics into your own mod and inherit from it, and all you have to do is change out the mesh, and you can set whatever offsets you want, and that'll deal with like 99% of basic mesh replacements. You could literally make complete tile sets that would replace all the building tiles with other themed building tiles that way, and it would be completely functional for that purpose. And that is an important point, by the way, that the structure skin BP does not have to inherit from the class of the structure it's intended to replace. The structure skin BP itself is pretty arbitrary. So essentially, the structure skin BP, if you inherited from the crazy cosmetics one, would always be that, but it could apply to replace the mesh of any other structure arbitrarily. What structure it is allowed to apply to is just based on that structure's that array, which is where the heck was it? I feel like I missed it somewhere. Um, oh, it's not, it's no, it should be here. Is it? Where was it? Man. Yeah, structure skin supported structures. Derp. So really, it's arbitrary what class the structure skin itself is. This is just what it can apply to, and so you could make all your tiles inherit from that crazy cosmetics base one, so you're just easily able to do mesh swaps, and then all you do is change out here, what specific tile it's intended to replace. So you've got it replace one mesh with a very specific other mesh that is going to map cleanly to it. So hope you guys have fun with this. We certainly will be making more with it ourselves, and we'll continue to advance kind of how far we can take some of the client side functionality as we notice areas where we can add further hooks into the structure skin system. Please somebody make some cool party games. I'd like to spend some time doing that in ARK. And that's it for custom cosmetics. And as I said, they don't download automatically currently. They activate automatically. The player does have to install the mods manually currently from the mod store, but hopefully in about 6 weeks that will be an optional automatic background download, which will lead to a tremendous kind of explosion of unique visuals within the game. So excited about that. Thanks everybody for your creativity and for what you make. Till next time, bye bye.